Continuing with the theme from underrated movies, today we're going to look at the top 10 underrated films from the 1960s.
Anyone got change for a quarter?
Sure. Don't say a word. That's perfectly natural. We're under surveillance. Rendezvous tonight. Bring this object.
By 1957, Life magazine called the 1950s the horrible decade for Hollywood. This didn't change for the first part of the 60s. Significant studios were pumping millions into aging historical epics and musicals, such as Hello Dolly, Cleopatra, and King of Kings. With the rise of the French New Wave, Japanese cinema, and spaghetti westerns making a splash in the U.S., audience members, mainly young people, demanded something new from Hollywood. They could find meaning, something with artistic value, like Michelangelo Antonioni's Blow Up, a film with full frontal nudity and distorted narrative structure. Or something like Bonnie and Clyde. Arthur Penn's crime film was the one that knocked on Hollywood's doorstep to say, out with the old, in with the new. Soon, films like The Midnight Cowboy, The Graduate, The Wild Bunch, Faces, The Trip, and Easy Rider weren't just filling movie theaters, but they were making money, creating a whole new brand of stardom and winning Oscars. New Hollywood was born. The 1960s remains one of, if not the most critical and significant decade of film history. The list explores 10 great films from the 60s that are sometimes overlooked or underrated compared to heavy hitters.
You're all invited to a centennial celebration. What they were celebrating wasn't important, and it sounded like a heap of fun until 2000 Maniacs.
The number 10 underrated film is 2000 Maniacs from Herschel Gordon Lewis in 1964. Three Yankee couples are lured into the small southern town of Pleasant Valley.
Another Pleasant Valley Sunday. Charcoal burning everywhere.
For a centennial celebration. The trip takes a dark, bloody turn when the residents begin killing the tourists one by one as revenge for the town's destruction during the Civil War. The film was written and directed by the godfather of gore, Herschel Gordon Lewis, a term given to him due to his ruthless exploitation films. The film stars 1963 Playboy playmate Connie Mason, who also starred in another one of Lewis's bloody horrors, Blood Feast, the year before. The film was one of the first to introduce audiences to the Southern gore and hicksploitation subgenres of cinema, the device that saw Northern outsiders stranded in the rural South who were then violently murdered by malignant backwoods Southerners. The film was incredibly influential on Tobe Hooper's classic horror, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, as well as other films such as Deliverance, Eaten Alive, and The Hills Have Eyes. What makes the film quite special is that it was shot in the small town of St. Cloud, Florida, and had the entire town's residents participate as actors and extras. This gave the film extra authenticity, which aided to the fish-out-of-water storyline that the characters from up north were experiencing. The MPAA heavily cut the film for its release, requiring it to be screened nationwide. Instead, the film mostly played at drive-in theaters and did considerably well, especially in the southern states. The crude, gory violence is what makes the film unique. It starts as a joyous trip full of laughter, fun, celebration, and that stereotypical southern hospitality. Then it soon turns into a violent nightmare of vengeance. What makes the film horrifying is the way the southern characters act. They're rarely angry or show their emotions of revenge. Instead, they follow out their violent plan with a smile, containing their hospitality. Looking at number 9, it's Point Blank.
Walker Reese isn't here. He's gone. 3 months ago. Gone. Cold.
After being double-crossed and left for dead, a ruthless gangster named Walker, played by Lee Marvin, swears revenge as he goes on a violent journey to retrieve the money that was taken from him. The script was written by Alexander Jacobs, David Newhouse, and Raphael Newhouse, and was based on the 1963 crime noir pulp novel The Hunter by Donald E. Westlake, or Richard Stark. The film was met with good reviews upon its release. Legendary film critic Pauline Kael wrote, "A brutal new melodrama is called Point Blank, and it is, intermittingly, dazzling." Roger Ebert praised the film, giving it 3 out of 4 stars and said, "As suspense thrillers go, Point Blank is pretty good. The film stood out in 1967, experimenting with various styles and techniques. It blended film styles such as film noir and French New Wave, and had a broken timeline due to the novel's non-linear structure. The film also plays with narrative rhythm, with long, quiet scenes suddenly juxtaposed with bursts of violence. Foreman and Marvin worked very closely on the film, with equal parts coming up with the ideas on how to shoot scenes and which visual metaphors to use. The film has inspired many other movies and filmmakers, most notably Steven Soderbergh, who provided commentary on the DVD release of Point Blank. You can see many similarities in style, character, and use of Los Angeles between Point Blank and Soderbergh's The Limey. Brian Helgeland's Payback, starring Mel Gibson, was also based on the novel The Hunter, although it wasn't as groundbreaking or critically acclaimed as Point Blank.
We need you for security purposes, Mr. Grant. They know they failed to kill Benish. Security thinks they'll try again.
Now we're at number 8, Fantastic Voyage.
A woman has no place on a mission
I
of this kind.
insist on taking my technician.
You'll take along who I assign.
Don't tell me who I'm going to work with.
With impressive special effects and a thrilling story, Fantastic Voyage is a must-see for any science fiction fan. The film was hugely successful, winning 2 Academy Awards at the 1966 ceremony for Best Art Direction, Color, and Best Special Effects. Even with this success, the movie is still overlooked by many, which is a shame considering its progressive story, impressive visuals, not to mention a great turn from Donald Pleasance before his James Bond and Halloween days. Attempts at remaking this movie have been discussed since the 1990s, with filmmakers like James Cameron, Roland Emmerich, and Guillermo del Toro all circled the project for it to never materialize.
All right, Pitt, what happened?
Well, I don't know, sir. All of a sudden, he just went crazy.
All of a sudden, huh?
That's certainly how it seems, sir. Of course, as I don't have to tell you, I didn't actually see it because I was concentrating on my scope.
Now we're up to number 7, which is Pretty Poison.
I'll give you something to fix that.
Are they drugs?
They're non-addictive. They're government issue. They're called ACTs. Go ahead, take one.
Anthony Perkins began the 60s by playing one of the most notoriously creepy villains in cinema history, Norman Bates, for those who were under a rock the past 50 years. So it's refreshing to see him play a young man who isn't as crazy as his co-star towards the end of the decade. He plays a disturbed arsonist who meets an innocent young woman and convinces her to join him on secret missions. But the two are in real trouble after one of those fake CIA missions goes wrong and she kills a security guard. As a result, Perkins' character in Pretty Poison is consistently surprised by how criminal his sweet girlfriend, Sue Ann, played by Tuesday Weld, is, and how far she takes him into a life of crime. This is a very dark comedy. Directors first. Director Noel Black and Tuesday Weld fought so much on set that Weld went on to talk disparagingly about this project. But critics love the film. It rarely gets remembered now, but it's hard to forget a quote like, "I met you on a Monday, fell in love with you on a Tuesday, Wednesday I was unfaithful, and Thursday we killed a guy together." How about that for a crazy week, Sue Ann?
It's easy when a man's blind or deaf or lost a limb. You can see it. But how about a man who can feel nothing for anyone except for himself?
Now we're at number 6, which is Twisted Nerve.
Whose only feeling is of rage when frustrated, and only fun destroying those who frustrate him.
The 60s saw several truly eerie psychological thrillers come to the forefront of filmmaking, and Twisted Nerve was very influential in that genre. While it is underrated today, Kill Bill paid homage to Twisted Nerve by using the score from Bernard Herrmann as the whistle song. The plot follows a young man named Martin, played by Howell Bennett, who pretends to have mental impairments to win sympathy from a young woman, played by Haley Mills. He has been crushing on her. When this idea doesn't go his way, he kills people that he feels come between him and his one true love. Twisted Nerve has always been controversial for its portrayal of intellectual impairment, and critics today remain conflicted. While that point continues to be debated, Twisted Nerve greatly influenced slasher films that followed it.
What's the sense of us sending out a 30-man posse when we got one man who can do it all by himself?
Now we're at number 5, The Big Gun.
I'll hunt you down and kill you like the rotten beast you are. But what about you? They told you I was guilty, and right away you start running after me.
From Sergio, not Leone, and it doesn't star Clint Eastwood, but it does star Lee Van Cleef in this spaghetti western as retired bounty hunter Jonathan Colorado Corbett on the hunt for a ruthless Mexican peasant, Cuchillo, played by Thomas Milan. He's accused of raping and killing a 12-year-old girl. Thinking it will be an easy task, Corbett finds himself in more of a struggle than he thought, as Cuchillo seems to be one step ahead. As the story progresses, Corbett discovers certain truths and revelations that change the motivations of his journey. The film was directed by Italian exploitation director Sergio Solima, who is known for films such as the mafia flick The Family, starring Charles Bronson, police thriller Revolver, starring Oliver Reed, and spaghetti western Face to Face, starring Thomas Milian and Gian Maria Valente. The script was penned by Solimo and Sergio Donetti. What are all Italian filmmakers named Sergio? It seems that way. Anyway, who wrote the Sergio Leone films for a few dollars more, Once Upon a Time in the West, and A Fistful of Dynamite? He then wrote and worked on some heavy hitters in the 1980s, such as Raw Deal, Renegade, and Man on Fire. The film's twists and turns are satisfying yet expected with both the genre and the filmmakers. But what makes the film special is the on-screen relationship between Lee Van Cleef and Thomas Milian. Milian's juvenile and despicable behavior, matched with Cleef's strict, straightforward determination, creates a two-man brand that could have worked wonders in comedies similar to that of Terence Hill and Bud Spencer. The film's secret sauce that really makes it stand out is its score, composed by the great and irreplaceable Ennio Morricone. The score is emotional yet grand and thrilling. Morricone's contribution to not only westerns, but films of all genres was and will be forever unmatched. He could boost a film's quality up to 10 just by simply adding some of his masterful themes to a scene. Although The Big Gun Down isn't the most excellent spaghetti western ever made, it sure is one of the most entertaining and satisfying to watch, especially when you have Lee Van Cleef at the top of his game, dominating the screen.
Jealousy led Martha and Ray down one of the darkest paths in the annals of American crime.
You're the hottest I've ever seen, and I don't have to take that from you.
The number 4 film on our list is The Honeymoon Killers.
Dear Martha, this is the first letter of this sort I have ever written.
Raymond, played by Tony LaBianco, is a sleazy yet charismatic con man. He involves Martha, played by Shirley Stoller, a bitter nurse, in his schemes to cheat wealthy single women. The schemes become dangerous and violent as Ray and Martha become romantically involved. The film was written and directed by Leonard Castle, which surprisingly was the only piece of cinema he ever wrote, directed, or worked on. When asked why he hadn't worked on anything else after The Honeymoon Killers, he replied, "I have 6 or 7 screenplays, and maybe something will happen. But one thing I can always say, and not every director can, is that I never made a bad film after The Honeymoon Killers." Anyway, producer Warren Steibel initially hired Martin Scorsese to direct the film, but he was fired for working too slowly. Scorsese later commented that he had been fired with pretty good reason. It was a 200-page script, and I was shooting everything in master shots with no coverage. They did decide to keep a few shots Scorsese filmed in the final cut. Castle excels in directing this crime thriller as he shows the true gritty nature of murder with intent and a twisted, manipulative relationship throughout the movie. Castle was inspired by the classic killer couple film Bonnie and Clyde, but not for the obvious reasons. He was revolted by how Penn's film was filled with beautiful shots of beautiful people. Instead, he wanted to put the actual disgusting reality of crime up on the screen. As a result, the 2 main characters in the film are nothing like Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway, charismatic and good-looking characters in Bonnie. Instead, Tony LaBianco's character wears a wig throughout the film, and Shirley Stoller's character is obese. When talking about the film's aim, Steibel said, "We wanted to do an honest movie about murderers. These are not charming people. They are sleazy people, but fascinating. Like in some movies, you won't leave the theater feeling sorry for the killers. It is not romanticized." The film is loosely based on the Lonely Hearts Killers, couple with the same name from the film suspected of having killed up to 20 victims during a spree between 1947 and 1949. As the film progresses, Ray and Martha's crimes become more serious. The film begins to feel more dangerous. The audience starts to see more violence. It builds and builds and delivers.
Imagine someone coming towards you who wants to kill you.
Now we're up to number 3. Peeping Tom.
Regardless of consequences.
A madman?
Yes.
Peeping Tom's reputation precedes it as the film that was so shocking to 1960s audiences that it derailed Michael Powell's career. As a result, it took time for audiences and critics to come around to the brilliance behind this voyeuristic horror film. The film has a simple, horrifying premise and utilizes Powell's signature style in saturated color. The plot follows an aspiring filmmaker, played by Carl Bohm, who murders his subjects. He is obsessed with the idea of fear, so he attaches a weapon to his camera to capture the fear his victims feel in the moments before their deaths. The voyeurism, horror, and eroticism outraged audiences and critics. The fact that the horror film was otherwise grounded in British realism made it even scarier. This was one of the first times audiences saw a monster that looked and even acted just like they did. Modern audiences will not clutch their pearls in quite the same way, but the horror is undeniable.
What are you doing?
How's your dad? It's okay.
Here you go.
Thanks a lot. What you hunting this time? Gonna shoot some pigs.
And now we're at number 2, Targets.
What are you typing? Aren't you gonna go to work?
One of the most defining directors of the indie American movement, Peter Bogdanovich, debuted his talents with Targets. He and his co-producer Polly Platt were creative with a few stipulations they had from Roger Corman. The filmmaking pair had previously worked for Corman on another movie. Corman would produce their new project. But Boris Karloff was contractually obligated to give Corman 2 days of work. Thus, Platt had the idea to have Karloff essentially play himself, a former horror movie star who feels real life has become scarier than the movies. He struggles to understand his role in a modern society that horrifies him, which is a story that runs in parallel with that of a lovely young man, played by Tim O'Kelly, who snaps and carries out a mass shooting. This film feels like it could have been made, written, and produced today. It's one of the few films to depict mass shootings in a culture where mass shootings are now fairly common. Everything about this 1968 film feels unusually modern, which is probably why Targets has garnered much more praise and attention in the decades that followed its initial release.
Careful. Can't you tell I'm not wearing a bra?
No.
Don't think about it. It'll only excite you.
And the number 1 underrated movie from the 1960s is Petulia.
You told the policeman you had a dizzy spell?
Right. I fell on my bottom.
You were beaten up. You were somebody's punching bag.
This is an absolute masterpiece, nearly lost due to the cancellation of the 1968 Cannes Film Festival, where it was set to premiere. Richard Lester's best work is in this film, as he collaborated with cinematographer Nicholas Rowe, who would go on to direct Don't Look Now. Despite its limited release, Petulia has always been very critically acclaimed. Roger Ebert gave it 4 stars, saying, "Petulia made me desperately unhappy, and yet I cannot find a single thing wrong with it." What kind of a film made Ebert say that? The film follows a wild socialite, Petulia, played by Julie Christie, who attempts to seduce a recently divorced middle-aged man, played by George C. Scott. He's struggling to find footing in the rapidly changing late 60s. Petulia starts in the middle of the story and is then pieced together in both directions at the same time. Like a psychedelic memento. It's one of the rare films about the hippie era filmed in San Francisco during the Summer of Love. As a result, the film managed to snag Big Brother and The Holding Company, also the Grateful Dead, for performances in the film, which added to the movie's meta-commentary on its characters' generational differences. And that was our show for today. What did you think? Do you agree with the list? What movies do you think belong in an underrated 60s list? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and I'd be honored if you would subscribe to my channel, click the bell to stay informed. Also, check out my Carl Vincent Vampire Hunter franchise in the comments section. And until next time, this is Kevin Given saying, live long and prosper, may the force be with you, and keep reaching for the stars.